welcome to Connected, a podcast brought to you by NEC, the Nova Economics Club. Where we discuss current economic and political issues and try to connect them with economic theory. And today we are going to talk about the European Union. Why? Because the European Union is under pressure. We see a continuous rise in populism and demagogy, especially from the right. And social fragmentation is on the rise, and along various lines, rural and urban, and between different cultures, between different age groups, and between different income groups. So it's really an important issue. And we want to talk about the prospects of a federal European Union in times of social stress. And we want to dig deeper into where does the European Union stand federally and what role does economic and fiscal policy play in building a more resilient union. And we could not think about a more suited guest for this episode and welcome you really warmly, António Rebelo de Sousa. I'm really trying to make an effort to pronounce
very well Portuguese.
your name correctly. And let me give you a short introduction of our guest. António Rebelo de Sousa is a professor at Louisiana University and University of Lisbon, a board member of the Order of Economists, a former member of Parliament, and advisor of the Minister of Finance. It's a really great pleasure to have you today and to talk to you. Thank you.
Well, it's a great pleasure for me too, and to have this opportunity. I also think that Europe is a challenge. I'm Europe-based, and I must confess, since I was very young, I was your age, approximately. I was already a federalist. Many years ago, that was many years ago. Well, of course, the project we had for Europe was not exactly what is happening nowadays. It was a little different. The configuration of Europe was also different at the time. But I think that there are several challenges for Europe. Europe has had different phases.
Mm-hmm.
Phases where there was a deepening of the integrationist process, and phases where there was an enlargement of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's not easy to conciliate the enlargement of Europe with the deepening of the integration process, you see, integrationist process.
Mm-hmm.
So every time we had a certain period of time where we did not have enlargements, there was the opportunity of making some reforms in Europe, and having a deeper integrationist process. Every time we made big enlargements, there was a deceleration of the integrationist process. During a certain time, the process of integration of Europe was very rapid. We had the free trade area, and then we have had the common market, we have had the beginning of the European Economic and Monetary Union. That was already in 1990, mainly after 1992 with the Maastricht Treaty. And so everything started in 1957 with the Treaty of Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And between 1957 and 1992, it was very rapid because we have had the free trade zone, we have had the common market, we have had the beginning of the economic and monetary union. It was fantastic, and as a matter of fact, we were having at the time 15 countries, it was easier to work with 15 countries.
Mm-hmm.
Then afterwards, we made the enlargement of the PECOS, the countries of the Eastern European countries, those like Poland, like Hungary, like Slovakia, like Slovenia, the Baltic Republics, etc. and then Cyprus and Malta. And so there was an enlargement of, first in 2004 of 10 countries, and then in 2007 Romania and Bulgaria. That was a little too much, as a matter of fact, to make the digestion of all those countries and to consider all those countries with the kind of organization we would like to have for Europe. It was a little difficult, and some mistakes were made. Nowadays that we see what is happening with Hungary and a little with Poland, but Poland is not so serious. Hungary is a very problematic country, and Slovakia is also a very problematic country. We must be careful with future enlargements. We have now new candidates for Europe, like for instance Albania, like for instance Bosnia-Herzegovina, like for instance Serbia, Moldavia, Montenegro, Macedonia of the north, and of course Ukraine and Turkey.
Yes.
And we must learn with the lessons of the past. We must learn with the lesson of Hungary. They don't have exactly the same conception of democracy we have. And because when we are Democrats, it's not only a question of being in favor of elections, free elections, several parties, existence of several parties, free speech, the right of free organization, free demonstrations. It's also very important, this separation of powers, independence of powers, judicial power, executive power, legislative power. And some people do not understand that. They don't have this conception of democracy. And so I have doubts about Serbia. I have I'm sure there are no conditions for Turkey to enter in the European Union, and Serbia is also quite difficult in my opinion, and even eventually with other countries. But of course we have compromises with Ukraine, and I think we are obliged to integrate Ukraine in the European Union, and Macedonia North is easy to integrate. There are countries like that that are easy to integrate, but we must be careful about that. Then I think that there is another problem, which is lately it was not possible to have the deepening of the integrationist process for all the European countries, and we have two velocity models of integration. One is the countries that have adopted the euro, that are in the euro area. They have a certain they have already built an integration in this area that is more sophisticated. And then you have the other countries. You have 20 countries in the euro area, and you have the other 70 countries that are not in the euro area. And those, they have a different methodology, as a matter of fact. And I think that in the future we'll have to speak about Europe with two velocity process of integration, separate. One is the euro area, and the other one is the other countries, as a matter of fact. Then we must make some reforms in Europe. I'm in favor of some reforms in Europe. First of all, and this is my federalist side, of course, I think that we should have a different budget for Europe, much heavier budget for Europe than we have nowadays. Well, it's 1% of the gross domestic, aggregated gross domestic product of the European countries. We should have more than that, and this calls for a larger effort from the European countries. As a matter of fact, it's not easy to do that. Then a second aspect that it is also very important is that we should have general direction for treasury, and we should have a minister of finance for the European Economic Union and Monetary Union. we should have a Minister of Finance. That's I have no doubts. And a minister not only of finance but also of economy, because we should not only think about something coordination of financial policies, but also coordination of economic policies, because there are sectors, strategic sectors, where we should have coordination in Europe. The infrastructures, energy, and I think it's also the fight against environment, let's say like that, and finally defense, the defense system. We should have coordination in Europe. That's like if we were speaking about a big country. Exactly. Well, we should have that. Without that, we will not survive in the long-term perspective. As Europe, as Europe, we are not going to survive if we don't have coordination at these levels. That's obvious that we should do that. And then we should accept the intervention of the European Central Bank in the primary markets when the European Central Bank is buying public debts in certain circumstances, always in certain circumstances when we are having a big crisis, as we have had, for instance, in 2011, 2012, 2013, until 2015. We should have that. Well, that's the concession of Romania. Romania has the same concession. Then another aspect that it is also very important for us to do is to rethink the institutional model of functioning of organization of Europe, because for some decisions we have a single majority approach, and for other questions we have a qualified majority approach. And the United States had solved the problem many years ago, although they have other problems. For instance, the system for the presidential elections, it's a very bad system, as a matter of fact. It is, while it was conceived, while it was when it was put into practice, it was necessary to conciliate the differences of the different states, and it was very difficult. But we have to learn with them one thing. It was much better. It would be much better to have two chambers in Europe, like in the United States of America. We should have a parliament in Europe, like we have the European Parliament. We have the European Parliament in Europe, and as you know, the criteria of nomination of the different of the members of the Parliament is population. Germans they have more population than Portugal. They have more members in the Parliament. There is a proportion. It's a proportion that it is easy to understand. But we should have at the same time a Senate, and in this Senate, each country should have two senators. Luxembourg should have two senators. Germany should have two senators.
So independent of the population.
Exactly. And some decisions should have the agreement of these two chambers. For instance, the decision for the presidency of Europe, the decision for the president of the European Commission, the decision for the minister of foreign affairs, the decision for the minister of finance. Well, there should be, instead of having a qualified majority, well, it would be necessary to have the agreement of the two chambers. And that's what I think.
Yes.
And like that, we can have a way for a kind of federalist Europe. And I'm a little creative, but I think that in the long-term perspective, this is the only solution. Okay. Of course, we have problems. You have told there are two other problems. One problem is the populist parties and the populist movements that nowadays we have in Europe.
Yes.
I have some friends that are leftists, that are very much to the left, as a matter of fact. They think it would be possible to have an alternative, a leftist alternative to Macron and to the Chancellor Schulz in Germany, an alternative more to the left. It's impossible nowadays in Europe to have something even more to the left than Macron and Schulz. It's ruling Europe to have something to the left of that one. It's impossible. They are not realistic. Well, we can always imagine one day we wake up and there is a miracle. For them, not for me, of course, but there is a miracle. And that can happen. Well, it's impossible. Okay. It's totally impossible. The alternative, existing alternatives between the ex-Macron Schulz and the extreme right.
Yeah.
And, or something close to extreme right. Well, if we look into France, the extreme right is much more powerful than the center right. Much more. If we look into Austria, the extreme right is very powerful. If we look into Slovakia, for instance, if we look even in Germany, well, the extreme right is nowadays much more powerful than it used to be. Yeah. And even in Portugal, maybe we are going to have a surprise. And happily, of course. And so the alternative is not between, leftist approach of the European project and the conservative democratic approach of the project of Europe. No, it's the alternative. It's between something in the center left or in the center, and a populist approach of the European project, with the extreme right ruling Europe one day. And and that's the end of Europe, as a matter of fact. So we must be realistic. We must be very realistic. Another aspect is one specific problem where we must rethink our policy is the immigration policy. Well, of course, I'm in favor of the existence of immigrants. Well, of course, I'm not a person of a very conservative person. I'm a person of center left. So I'm in favor of immigrants, but we must have a policy for immigration.
Yes.
Because there is a rule that should be respected in all the European countries. If we accept someone to live in our country and have residence in our country, I'm not speaking about a tourist that is spending 2 or 3 weeks or 1 month in a certain country in Europe. No, I'm talking about someone who is resident and has his family in Europe. He should declare he accepts the laws of European laws and the laws of this country. And if he does not respect the European laws and the laws of the country, he should be put away from it. I'm in favor of that. Because otherwise we are having here immigrants that are not Democrats, they are fundamentalists, they are against our institutions, they only want to infiltrate our institutions, and then afterwards they think they are the right to have Sharia in a certain part of a town because they are dominants in a certain part of the town, a town that belongs to a country which is a democratic country with democratic rules, and that is impossible. We cannot accept that. And so we must rethink our immigration policy. Because if we don't do that, we give reasons for the extreme right to take certain positions.
Yeah, and I think we already see that. And that
we must have this courage.
Yeah.
This is really very important. As we must rethink our immigration policy, because in some cases, immigration is useful for the country.
Yes.
If someone is going to study in Germany or Portuguese or in the United States of America, that can be useful for our country. We should not be against that. We should even, in some cases, support that.
Yes.
And but if of course we are not supposed to support immigration to China or to Russia or something, because they have no strategic interests for Portugal or for Europe, you see. So we must have the courage of putting in practice an immigration policy in Europe. I think that's something of very great importance for us to survive.
Thank you so much. So you already mentioned a lot of really important points and really interesting
and
points.
And I presented solutions.
Yes, you presented solutions.
Maybe bad solutions, but there are solutions.
Yeah, that's true.
I have ideas for
yes, and that's really really important to have some ideas. But like our idea was to better understand the present, what's going on currently. We also have a look at the history. So I'd like to know more about like the Portuguese integration process into the European Union, and you were actively like supporting the the Portuguese integration process into the European Union. So I would like to know from you, like the gap, how significant was the gap between Portugal and the rest of Europe in the 1970s and 80s in social, cultural, and economic terms, and how is the gap still present today? So yeah, maybe you can.
Yes, I can give you a rough idea. But well, in 1974, we had more or less 50% of the per capita gross domestic product of Europe. Well, I'm speaking about the average in Europe. So nowadays we have, if we consider the 27 countries, something like 76% of the per capita gross domestic product. And now integration in Europe was really very important. As a matter of fact, well, some leftist groups and extreme right groups, when we decided to enter Europe, they were against. They used to say that our country would disappear with integration in Europe because our enterprises could not compete with the big European enterprises. But as a matter of fact, they were wrong. And we still have quite a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises. And you are in Europe, they did not disappear. And as a matter of fact, 97% of Portuguese enterprises are small and micro enterprises, as a matter of fact. The provisions of these people were not right. And we improved a lot in what concerns quite a lot of indexes concerning the rate of people that are dead when they are born, consider the next expectancy of life, considering, for instance, the literacy, and our situation was very bad when after the 25th of April. In the 25th of April, the rate of illiteracy was very high compared to the rate of illiteracy that exists nowadays. So we have improved a lot. And even in what concerns women's rights, because, for instance, I don't know if you know that, but women were only authorized to leave the country without the authorization of the husband in 1978.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
In Portugal. But you should know. Well, the husband could open any letter that was addressed to his wife without authorization of the wife, and only after 1978 that this was changed.
Wow.
The husband was the chief of the family necessarily, so if there was a separation, he would stay with the children until 1978. So, there was a lot of inequalities between men and women in the ancien regime, and we must have this clear idea that it was a big improvement for us to enter into Europe. Then we made quite a lot of infrastructures in the 80s, at the time of Cavaco Silva, when Cavaco Silva was Prime Minister, and that was in the 80s, also in the beginning of the 90s, and we used to have, there was, as a matter of fact, I'm not in favor of the Nazi regime, although my father was minister of, he was Secretary of State of Salazar, and he was Minister of Marcel Quetan in the Nazi regime. Yes, but I was in the opposition. But I used to like my father very much.
That's interesting.
But we had different ideas. And he was Governor General of Mozambique during the colonial period, so you see. But as a matter of fact, there was, I didn't agree with the Syrian regime, of course, not at all. But there was an interesting thing. It was strategic planning. We had already a general direction of strategic planning, working with the government. And for a long time after the 25th of April, we used to have a department for strategic planning. And nowadays, we don't have a department for strategic planning. It's something that I don't understand. Because if we need to make new infrastructures, if we need to decide for new airports, etc., we don't have a general direction for planning and strategic planning. We don't have. Well, and it's weird that a socialist government does not have a direction for strategic planning, and I can understand it. But I would understand that if it was a very conservative government against planning. So we had difficulties in the beginning because when we had the revolution, we had two very important moments. The 25th of April, 1974, when there was a rupture with the dictatorship, and then the 25th of November, where there was the rupture with the Marxist-Leninists. And it was obvious that we were going to have a parliamentary democracy like in Western democracies. Because, well, until between April 74 and November, November 75, we could not say exactly what model of society we were going to have. Because we have had the Communist Party in the government, and we have had even a government which was the fifth government after the revolution, which was only composed by communists and the extreme left. The Socialist Party was not there, the PSD was not there, etc. It was only a communist government, as a matter of fact. We had a revolutionary council with only militaries, and there was we had quite a lot of nationalizations, and most of our economy was nationalized, and so there was a certain tendency for us to have a communist country like the Soviet Union, and it was only clear that we are not going to have this kind of country. In the 25th of November 75, because there was a confrontation between the moderates, those that were against that, and the radicals. And we won in this military confrontation. I was, of course, on the moderate side, as it is obvious. At the time, as a matter of fact, I was the first president of the Young Social Democratic League in Portugal. And I was with the moderates, of course. And then it was decided that we should make an approach to the European Union.
Yes.
And that happened in the 80s. We made negotiations at the time of Mário Soares. We made negotiations. Mário Soares was a very important leader because he was, as a matter of fact, the leader of the fight against the communists. Well, we had other leaders. We had Sakarnay, but Sakarnay disappeared during a certain period. He was not here. And when we were fighting against the communists, and he only appeared later on. He disappeared between the beginning of 75 and October 75, more or less, and September of 75. And And as a matter of fact, he had a moment where he did not believe that we could have a democracy. He was convinced that the communists were going to take over the power.
Mm-hmm.
But then he understood that there was eventually the possibility of changing the situation and of winning the war against it was a domestic war, as a matter of fact, against the communists. And as a matter of fact, we won. And Mazzola was also a great supporter of the idea of entering to the European Union, secondary too.
Yeah.
And Francisca was the leader of the CDS. And so we entered, but we made the negotiation in 85. We began before that, 82, 83, and then we entered in 85, and then entered. Well, as a matter, it was the 1st of January of 86.
Yes.
When we entered. At the same time as Spain, right? Exactly. And then there was the Amsterdam Treaty, where, of course, there was what we call the common markets, as a matter of fact, approach, and we were very good pupils. We were fantastic because we had quite a lot of plans to make highways and to make infrastructures coming out from the previous regime, as a matter of fact. It's the reason why I said the previous regime was a dictatorship, but they only had an advantage. They had some strategic planning. And we had all the projects done at the front for the Secretariat of the Prime Minister. And so with some changes, we presented all these projects, we approved everything in FEDER, and we had a lot of investments in the infrastructures, and the country began to change very rapidly between 86 and 90. The rate of growth of the country was 4.5%.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Every year. No. So it was quite a lot, and natural rate of employment was more or less 4%, something like that, for something. And then there is a period where there was a slight in where there was a deceleration in the growth in the beginnings of the 90s, and then in 94 the situation changed a little. It was a little better, and then in 95 the Socialist Party won the elections with António Rebelo de Sousa, and this was also a very good period. I was working with the Minister of Finance of the Socialist government at the time, and it was a very good period because we had a rate of growth of something like 3.7% per year, and the rate of employment was even something of 3.4%, something like that. It was fantastic. So it's interesting. People do not know that, but between the 50s, the 1950, and 2000, our rate of growth was the 7th or 8th highest in the world.
Oh wow!
Yes, exactly. We were a very well succeeded country between the 1950 and 2000. The problem was after 2000.
Okay.
And after 2000, as a matter of fact, we suffered the consequence of the enlargement of Europe with when the Pecos entered in the European Union, because Germany, France, quite a lot of countries that were investing a lot in Portugal. They preferred after that. Their priority was the Eastern Europe.